Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Over-Analyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. Well, hello, everybody. And join us tonight as my good friend Jim Chaboyko and I overanalyze the Apple streamer Tetris. All right, here's the dealio on tonight's show. Tetris it's ostensibly the story of how one of the world's most popular video games found its way to players around the globe. And yeah, that's laying it on a little thick. The filmmakers, they actually take a thriller angle on this tale, wherein businessman Hank Rogers and Tetris inventor Alexei Pajitnov join forces in the USSR, risking it all to bring Tetris to the masses, to the lumpen proletariat. And I think that's my cue, folks. That is my cue to bring on my co-host with the most, Mr. Jim Chaboyko. Jim, tell us who the key players were in front of and behind the camera.
Spasiba, which means thank you. That's the only Russian I know. But yeah, so we had starring Taron Egerton, and some I don't know if you'd recognize, or if people would recognize too many of the names. A lot of them are Russian. Toby Jones is in this, as well as Nikita Efremov. We have Sofia Lebedeva. I practiced these beforehand. Igor Grabuzov. And one that I really liked was Oleg Stefanko, which was a is he bad, is he good kind of character. We also had Rick Yoon, Roger Allam, and Matthew Marsh as Mikhail Gorbachev, who on Google accidentally says Mikhail Gorbachev is playing Mikhail Gorbachev, but that's not the case.
Jim, before we get into the spoiler zone, tell me, is this Tetris, this 8-bit Argo, a see it or skip it?
For me, it's a see it. I had a lot of fun. It's probably a deeply unserious movie. It's not a documentary, but they have some design elements that they carry all the way through. They have levels. They have graphics.
Okay, in a sentence.
It was awesome.
This sounds like a paragraph now.
Sorry. Great pace, great fun.
Yeah. For me, I'm not as keen on it as you are, Jim, but it's a see it for me too. By the end of it, I was enjoying myself thoroughly, and for what it lacks in story structure and, dare I say it, stakes, it makes up for, like you said, in style and a kind of joie de vivre.
Yes,
so there you go.
Yeah.
Before we move forward, looks like we got Jelly Duck 100 is in the house.
Oh, hello, sir.
He says, Ahmed says, it kind of reminds him of the Steve Jobs story. Let's put a pin in that comment, because that's a question I have for you later, what some of the movies that this sort of brings up. But yes, maybe we should, you know what, Jim? Let's
immediately enter the spoiler zone.
The spoiler zone.
I think I just spoiled the spoiler zone. Give it away.
Let me ask you this. I want to start with something light. Roger Allam, of course, at his mustache twirly best, because he really can play a great prick,
Yeah.
plays Robert Maxwell in this, a true real-world villain, long before Rupert Murdoch took over our brain as a corporate media douchebag. What is the deal with the terrible makeup?
Yeah, I mean, he did resemble him, in shape and size and everything else in the dyed hair. But yeah, I mean, that sort of. I sort of noticed that, but I guess, is it worse than Trump's? Maybe not. I don't know.
Trump, though, it's him.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Whereas here it's like, oh, for the love of God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I think they approximated him okay from what I've seen. I haven't looked at Maxwell footage in a while. It's kind of interesting at the end they don't talk about
I
his
think
ultimate
otherwise
fate,
everything is fine except that makeup, which every time it took me out of the story. It's
Did it,
just so obvious, so obviously a fat suit, so obviously, it's like, I know this. Hey, I know that's Roger Allam playing while putting on a costume,
yes.
Otherwise, you'd mentioned design, and I think that's what did you think they were trying to achieve with that whole aesthetic?
Yeah, I was all in for it. I know some people would probably say it's too much, but they jumped on it and they carried it forward. They had levels, as the challenge.
That's not the question, though.
Yeah,
What
but
do you think they're trying to
with the
achieve
graphics
with the
and stuff.
aesthetic? Yeah, the graphics were a nice bit, but that wasn't, and rightly so, and appropriately so. They didn't hammer that home. It wasn't like every second scene there was a doot.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the general, the aesthetic of let's say, the live action pieces. And again, what do you think they were trying to achieve with that?
I think they were just trying to establish, set it in the 80s, establish it in the 80s. Taron Egerton had his big overcoat on half the time with the shoulder pads and things like that. Like they went all in, even music. I looked at the soundtrack before we started. And I guess they did musical versions of which I didn't really pick up on all of them, but they did like Two Tribes from Frankie Goes to Hollywood, etc. But they were all in.
Final Countdown.
Final Countdown, which they sang along to, and
and I even think at the end a Russian version.
Yeah,
in the final chase.
You know what? Actually,
the chase scene.
Heart of Glass was not Blondie. It was another person, it sounded like an Eastern European person.
Yeah.
And Holding Out for a Hero as well was done by somebody named Felina or something like that, not Tina Turner. So even that seemed to be kind of a series of interesting choices.
But it fit.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I real commendable job on and for me it because they were all in. I actually told my son, you have to watch this because he's a big video game guy, and with video games comes video game lore and history, the first Game Boy, and so you're establishing it that it's it's definitely a product of the 80s.
Yeah.
And I think they just really wanted to use that as an anchor almost.
Well, they certainly didn't. Going back to that 80s thing, and this is certainly something I noticed, I thought it was really stylized. That said, at least they didn't go for some of those standard, everyone's got popped collars and no one wears earth tones and what's the word I'm looking for here, Jim?
In terms of clothing?
No, in terms of the tone, the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Like the visual aesthetic.
Well, they didn't.
They didn't go for those bright, hey, everyone's wearing parachute pants and super bright. That over the top, ridiculously bright. I'm thinking, how did Chris Pine's resurrected Rogers look in Wonder Woman 1984, where it was like, whoa, this is too much.
Yeah. I mean, it was subtle enough. It definitely. I remember seeing, just a quick aside, a film of Dance Night or some night at Strawberries, which is was a local bar, and I thought, oh, this is
remember
in the middle of the
Strawberries.
80s, and I think that was like with dancing and stuff. It was the whitest video I'd ever seen in my life, but wasn't it didn't achieve that kind of height of lunacy, 1980s lunacy. I thought they fully committed while at the same time restrained themselves a little bit too. But it just it made the whole thing fun, and maybe that speaks to me as somebody who grew up in that age. I don't know if you felt the same way, and I'd be curious. That's why I sort of want my son to watch, because I'd like to know his reaction.
Well, this is, and well, let's start with this, like, because in that aesthetic, in that look, they're saying something about culture. Part of it is like, I think the last time you got to see Soviet Russia, Soviet Moscow, not in winter, in that slushy, shitty winter that you and I know so well, right here in Winnipeg, was maybe Russia House with Sean Connery and Michelle Pfeiffer. But let's go to Japan first. And, Richard L. is in the house.
Oh, hey.
Good to see you here, Richard L. And I'm sure that means Katie Fowler is somewhere nearby.
Hi, guys.
But back to this, cultural references. You lived in Japan for a few years, not much longer after this. Was there anything where you were like, that works for me, or that maybe poked you in the eye?
A lot of the Japan scenes were sort of apartment, big city life, and we lived out in the country. So that was one of the biggest differences. Not even so much, it's Western standard of living, but one of the stranger things to get used to was Inaka life, which Inaka's, the sticks, basically. Inaka life versus city life. So, and we had a house, so we didn't have the whole apartment scene, the crowded apartment, and that kind of thing. But yeah, nothing really. I really dug the transitional graphics when they had the video game of the apartment or the hotel. But nothing really sort of was too eye pokey there. They didn't spend too much. Most of those were interiors. It may not even have been filmed in Japan, I'm thinking, but shocking. But it wasn't not too out of place. I don't think.
One of the moments, and I did want to ask you about it. There was a scene, and it's actually one of this maybe hooks into story now, but where his oldest, Maya. Mm-hmm. She is all excited about her dad seeing her in her concert, right? Mm-hmm. Was there any part of that where you're like, because it's what I thought, and this goes to my own, let's say, Western television idea of Japanese culture, but it's like, you're going to miss my concert, which is a super Western movie trope. But, I think, well, no, your father's a salaryman, or not even a salaryman. He's got to hustle his own thing. It'd be like, Papa is going to make money for the family. Yes. Be happy he's acknowledged your existence before he goes to the office. Am I way off base there?
First of all, that was my least favorite part of the movie. Although they did sort of use it at the end, it was the missing concert. I just hate that. I know it's shorthand for. I know it's shorthand for guy not being a fully involved parent or woman. So, and that's such an easy shorthand, but I sort of wish they would find a way around that. The light on the empty chair, and that whole thing, and it made it so cringy. But
and I shouldn't even. I'm picking on I'm picking on Japanese culture.
Yeah.
It happened here. No, your father couldn't make it. He's at the office.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Full stop.
Portrayal of workaholic.
No, I'm not even talking about the movie. I'm
Yeah.
talking about your
In
father's
general.
at work. He couldn't get a different shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so, there's a built in that trope is a certain assumption that the only reason the parent, and you're right, yeah, it's not just the guy, the parent is at work is because they choose to be there. Where versus, well, most of it is like, I couldn't get the scheduled time off. This was always going to be a 60-hour hour a week job, or and usually mostly I couldn't get the time off because, oh right, I work for an asshole. I work for a James Maxwell.
Yeah, yeah. And, there's after work obligations as well in Japan and a few other things. But, along with that, as you're saying, sort of a Western idea, there's the missing basketball game, the baseball, the piano recital, the sing along, that whatever, fill in the blank. And you've seen them all before. But, that's probably my least favorite part of the movie there.
Walt 65 in the house says,
Oh, hey!
Geez, your parent has a job they can't get out of. Deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, and here's my bigger criticism of that moment, of that, it isn't even developed. He's at his lowest when he's at his lowest. He gets home. He's being blackmailed by the Russians and being threatened by them and got beaten up and had some KGB agent in the middle of the street says, oh, and I'm going to take your Levi's, because that's what they're doing. Just randomly robbing any Westerner with their Levi jeans. But he is at his lowest. He's just had a meltdown. He's missed his dog. But they never develop that. Like, it's kind of, we see a little bit of it at the beginning, in a first act, which is a big mush of stuff. But at the end, he's like, well, I'm sorry. Here, I'm making it up to you, sweetheart. So it's like one of those things where it's like, is this even a character flaw? Like it's not developed well. And I'm not sure. This is a movie with some style, and because of Egerton has such charm.
Yeah.
It manages to get through what I think is a weak first act and very little character development. Even like Sasha, the translator / spy / honeypot trap / it's like, what, she flips on a dime?
Yeah.
Yeah, she got to that high a level and she didn't know that her bosses would be open to a bribe. It's like she's...
Yeah, and her hair changes too once we find out that she's all business.
Wow. Another classic. Okay, it's in a ponytail now.
Yeah.
Makeup gone. Although I got to admit, as ridiculous as that scene was where she comes in, oh my goodness, thank goodness you're okay, and now I will kiss you.
Of course,
that
snap.
Look that she had was super 80s.
Yeah.
The big ton of hairspray hair, that super smoky eye. Super smoke.
Yeah. But in terms of not developing that idea of the sort of the absent parent, no, they sort of circle back to it at the very end.
Well,
and they sort of use that as sort of him getting back in harmony with his wife again to some extent. But not well developed. And there's also another passage in it where she says something like, where he says, I'm just trying to provide for us. And she says something like, you already were. And so you have to that sort of
great moment.
Yeah.
Except that it wasn't, that's the first we hear of it.
Yeah,
She
yeah, and then you
doesn't
have to
in the
wonder
first
about,
act go, whoa, don't risk. We already have a good life. I don't know what you're like.
Yeah.
It's another overused character flaw. I'm just trying to do this for a family. And the good woman, the supportive woman goes, we already have a wonderful life.
well, that could have been developed too, like
Well, but that's
basically
it
calling
isn't,
out the
so
bullshit.
we get this great, what could have been a great moment at the end of the second act. And it's like, well, that's a great line. Too bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't earned.
Yeah. But yeah, and I sort of wish they did develop that, because you're sort of wondering, is he just bullshit? Is he a guy who's just trying to make his way through this crazy world, or is he the guy who's looking for the great score, the big score,
yeah.
and wanting the credit for it as well? And
Yeah.
so that's sort of calling the character out on his bullshit, and it lasts for about a nanosecond.
Except that, and here's the thing though. Well, is he either of those? Like,
Well-
what bullshit is he being called? The only reason you're even saying bullshit is because that's what happens when those lines are delivered. Oh, well, then that must have been what happened. Except that we never see that.
Yeah.
He is actually, over the course of the story, we're actually learning he's the only honest man in the thing.
Oh, well,
You know, he may be a hustler, but he's an honest hustler. As his the inventor's wife says, he's dumb, but he's honest.
Yeah, yeah. The what I thought it was sort of
Like, develop that. It's like, hey, he's really naive. Honey,
So what-
you're incredibly naive. Don't get played this time like you have been before. I love you. I love that you're naive, but
Here's something you could have developed. There's good communists and bad communists in this movie. There's good capitalists and bad capitalists, and the whole thing sort of reminded me of that whole good guy with a gun argument, except substitute gun with capitalism.
yeah.
And or communism, right? And it just count on the good people; they'll get you out of this. But unlike Maxwell and the crooked KGB agent, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and he wasn't even a KGB agent. I mean, he had his flunkies,
Or he was a
but he was
politician,
like
yeah.
a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
Well, that leads me to another question, Jim.
Sure.
This is, I'm sticking with it. This is 8-bit Argo.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it billed as a thriller. Was this the way to tell the story? And I'm thinking of other ones. Now, Jelly Duck mentioned the Apple guy. Help me out here.
Oh, Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs mentioned that story, but I'm also thinking of The Big Short,
Yeah.
or Moneyball.
Moneyball. Yeah, yeah.
And I don't mean that doesn't mean you're removed of comedy. You could have, but I'm wondering, was this the right way to tell this story?
Yeah, I mean, they clearly weren't going for the documentary angle, because even
Well,
in the Wikipedia
nor
entry,
was Argo.
or Hank. Well, yeah, says, "See the bitter Canadians." Hank, he says that some of these things happened, some of them didn't, and so I thought, well, I'm sure a lot of this is the timing's a little, the ending's a little tight,
Yeah. Well,
clean
and there's a car chase and an
Yeah.
arrest, and it's no, this is late 80s.
yeah.
This is late 80s Soviet Union. I mean, you could have had more of I'm thinking Iannucci. He did Veep in the
Oh
Loop.
yes, yep.
Veep in the Loop, even Death of Stalin, which is darkly hilarious, but just this farce of him dealing with the bureaucracy and the double dealing in that. Like, that could have been an angle that would say more explore the time and some of the themes of what was going on in the former Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, is there a missed opportunity here?
You know, I think the pace of this was sort
Walt
of part of...
65. Sorry, Chip.
No.
Bitter, bitter Canadians.
Robbed again.
Exactly. Where's our credit? Yeah, I mean, I think the pace is part of the raison d'etre for this, is to tell a fairly light on its feet story. I mean, you're dealing with and it is light on its feet. It moves super well. I was engaged immediately. You know, it is a bit shallow but you know, overall it's a bit of a romp. It's sort of a swashbuckly. It's almost reminds me of
Swashbuckly, maybe. I'm not sure if it's a romp though.
Yeah, no romp. Yeah. But it's one of those sort of like energetic sort of run from point A to point B kind of thing. And
once
I was in.
He's in Russia and he discovers he's been screwed by assholes outside of the Soviet Union, which I don't think was explored enough because it's so in love with the entrepreneurial spirit. Then I got engaged. It's like, oh, wait a second. Well, this is where the movie, oh, wow, the movie really is starting now. I was not engaged in the first act. I was like, kind of, well, hey, we committed to it, so I guess I got to watch it. We got to keep watching it. And every now and then it's like, is it starting? Are we? Oh my God, this is like 32 minutes in. Oh.
Yeah.
But after that, I was in. And everything you say, I think, kicked in after minute 32. Right down to the end, which is like just one of your cheesier ends. I was like,
Yeah.
Although in anything I was looking up on Hank of the inaccuracies, well, I'll get into that when I do a separate short on historicity. But one of the things is like, you know, the daughter's mentioned, the wife isn't. Is there a divorce somewhere in there?
Yeah.
You know, maybe at the end. And then if they had done that, I'd say, well, you did get a divorce. It was like kind of, oh. Wow.
I sort of wondered when they were holding hands at the end, you know, would they have been holding hands if he didn't succeed with the deal, you know? Oh, my successful husband. I guess it's okay. I guess it was worth it. But you know, I think another thing too is that when you're dealing with something like the Soviet Union is such a heavy subject, and it's such a, you know, you don't see many light stories about the Soviet Union, so you sort of don't want to get into that Gorky Park mode or anything.
Well, but that's another cultural thing.
Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, the Soviet Union generated comedies about the farce of dealing with their own bureaucracy.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think a romp is certainly possible. And, and I disagree with you and Walt saying, dealing with Russians, romp? I don't see that. There's something comic about dealing with a ridiculous bureaucracy and the constant circles. Like, one of the things Hank said in an interview, he says, you know what they did capture in the tone and the mood was my mood when I was in Russia. Not that he's getting beaten up by KGB agents or, you know, forever. No fucking Russian bureaucrat is risking their career threatening a Japanese national in Japan. You know? Don't ask how we got in your office in this foreign country.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not late 80s Japan or Russia or Soviet Union. And now they're too busy defenestrating their own oligarchs to you know, but where was I going with that? The romp aspect. It could have been a romp, but I'm okay with the. I thought I agree with you. Once it got going, it was pretty light, but there was other opportunities here than to say we're just going to make it all up. You know, there's going to be car chases. There's going to be. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Late night thuggery.
People threatening children, you know. That kind of thing.
Like
well,
out of
several
30s Soviet Union, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't tie anybody to a railroad track, so we'll give them that.
Yeah.
But,
Well, and that's where I'm like, I think of the death of Stalin, which is remarkably funny and fucking dark.
yeah.
But it's also, like you say, a light, and it has, like, maybe not romp, but what am I thinking? Screwball comedy aspects to it.
Yeah.
You know, including, and also goes to some of the, let's say, the societal character stuff. And I'm thinking of when Steve Buscemi's Khrushchev, and they're all just moving around the coffin as they're scheming and their pettiness, or when they see Olga, Stalin's daughter, and they're all just run. We got to get her on our side first, and it's just so ridiculous and small and petty and relatable. And then meanwhile, there's Beria, molesting young girls. Ugh.
Yeah. What a cast.
Woof.
Cast of fun-loving characters. The I got to watch that again. It's been a while, so but I remember enjoying it quite a bit. But I sort of wonder if when you're dealing with Russia, if there's a trap set there, because it can be dark and depressing and that kind of thing. But they avoided it here. I mean, I don't think that's inevitable, but I think it's something that you sort of want to avoid. Try watching a Leviathan.
Well,
that was a fun watch.
Upbeat. But and this is what I'm saying about, like, I get what they're going for. If Hank is, and I keep referring to, it's Rogers, right? Hank Rogers?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Just, geez, that last name keeps popping up, this time in real life.
Are you from the Jakarta Rogers? Yeah.
If looking at Russia, especially of the time, how much are we imputing we're now in Putin's Russia, we're dealing with Putin's Russia and our own sort of limited view of that versus, again, late 80s Russia. One of the valid criticisms that was made of Chernobyl, and there weren't many. One was when, is it Sherbesky? Isn't that who, the Swede?
Oh, Stellan Skarsgård?
Stellan Skarsgård plays Sherbesky, whatever his character's name was. I'll have them throw you out of the plane. And, a couple of people are like, this was not 1938 Russia. This is like, no one's doing that. You get fired, like anyone does when they, and this is what I mean about sort of the Russians are all this. And it's like, I don't know. I've seen that kind of bureaucratic pettiness here, as a bureaucrat. You watch politicians and have to write down what they say like it was important. Sorry, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But, you work at Hansard, you listen to them. It's
can get pretty petty, yeah.
Well, no, I'm thinking we're seeing some of the same human things here.
Yeah.
But we can't make a movie about Russia without putting it in winter. And it's like, they do have a summer.
Yeah.
They have
That's
sun, plants and everything, flowers.
Yeah.
Nope, it's got to be gray. It's got to be all those heavy things you say, which I think it's like, I after a while, you're like there's so many tropes in this movie that I'm kind of like, well, I know what it is. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's my biggest beef with this film in a way, is it's not just light, it is shallow. They're not really saying anything new, and nor are they actually telling me anything culturally about how video games how big they were in the 80s, how big some of this stuff was.
Well, they do say that the Soviet Union has fallen, and we can thank Tetris for that. I think there's a newscast at the very end, and they say perhaps Tetris. I think they say something like perhaps Tetris is partially responsible. And I thought, I don't think it's at all possible.
What?
Yeah.
No,
Like,
oil glut.
Yes.
Global recession and an oil glut. All of a sudden, Gorbachev did not have the ability to cut checks like he did before.
A little bit of Chernobyl too. Et cetera, et cetera.
Walt says, death of Stalin works by showing things were so insanely, horribly awful that we can only deal with it as a dark comedy. Very true. Then he says, big question. How do current events overshadow any look of Russia right now? That's a great, it has to be a factor, right? And that is an excellent comment, Walt. And I do agree with you, we look at this as, well, that's Putin's Russia. It's like, no, it wasn't. I mean, it was, even although it was cracking, it was still infinitely more economically powerful before the coup than it is now. Russia has just shrunk so much. So it's almost like it's shrunk to a half of, 2/3 of what it was, an economy smaller than that. And
smaller than California, I think, or something to that effect. Yeah.
Oh, it's smaller. It's roughly, I did the math on this, Jim. It's about the same size Canada's, but here's the thing. They have 4 times the population.
Yeah.
Like, that's how fucking poor that country is. It's poor.
And get away from the main cities, and it's even poorer. I've read a couple of animal research, the tiger, the book about tigers, and the book about the Blackiston fish owls, and these researchers that go into these areas, and oh boy, it makes Deliverance look like a rodeo drive. It's really not in great shape. I think there's sort of an issue here when you're writing about 80s Russia in 2023 or 2022 or whenever this is written. One of the quotes that Bednikov says, which is the sort of the on the fence bureaucrat, you're not sure where he's going to go. Yeah. He said, "We're turning into a nation of thieves," and I was thinking, would that be was that accurate then, or was that just fast forward a couple of years?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Not entirely sure there, but and also when you're talking about history, you're talking about now. So is that really talking about today's Russia?
Well, and
where
this
it's a kleptocracy. So.
Yeah, and this is what I think they are. Like, some of it is like it is a period piece.
Yes,
and so as far as the meaning goes, and it's so. I'm going to say shallow, but I think it's almost kind of on the nose. You have this, these, I mean, Maxwell stands in for Rupert Murdoch. Kevin, it's Kevin, right? That's the kid.
Kevin Maxwell.
Kevin Maxwell. Who? Wow. Such a, as a human being, sack of you-know-what. It's got to take Ghislaine, his sister, who literally conspired with a fucking pedophile, pardon my poor language, to make that... Like, to actually not be the worst Maxwell child.
Congratulations.
Like, wow. Because he, just as his dad did, he went through a couple monster bankruptcies and always kind of like a bunch of question marks of who are you ripping off? How are you still rich? And now he's got some racist, I'm researching trying to fund jihadism, which is such a right-wing kind of, it's the jihadists, that's the problem. No, it's you thieves, you kleptocrats at the top.
The offer to, you give us the game and we'll give you our Collier's encyclopedia. I thought, oh, geez.
Yeah.
But it was, that was
good
part of the
they
fun.
took a check. It's like,
Yeah.
no, US dollars, please.
That was part of the fun of the movie, is to see the sort of the Maxwells get theirs. They didn't mention his death at the end, but that, I guess, was a few years in the future.
Walt says, in reference to our continued chat, Gauze, I wish we had Gorby. Oh, yes. Yeah, now it is less than the size of Italy. And it's right, it's a... then Dragon Movie Guy,
Oh, hey!
who apparently loves playing Tetris.
Yeah. Well, that's a good game.
Now,
I've played a few hours myself.
Walt 65 is referring to a fairly balanced look at Russia in Citizen X with Donald Sutherland. I have not seen this film. Got to put it on the list.
Well, it's a serial killer movie, so I don't think it's the one about the Chikatilo, I think.
Oh, and that's what's his name? Him and Tom Hardy. Didn't Tom Hardy, wasn't he the investigator in the
Watch I'll look it up here.
Yeah.
While we're chatting.
I think, though, what's interesting is if you look at Russian-generated art, especially about the Soviet Union, it's not so much, they're not whining. They're bitching about the bureaucracy. It's the system, not necessarily evil men or just incompetence and the bureaucracy and, it's not necessarily all just about Levi jeans, although consumer goods were a big part of it. There are moments where they're like, who cares how much money I have? I can't buy anything with it.
Yeah. I think one of the things I think is, and maybe I'm reading a bit into this, is the sort of the hunger for pop culture in this, where they, we want theirs, they want ours. They want our jeans. They're singing Final Countdown at a probably illegal bar. We want
Some
their
underground
video game
club.
Yeah. We want their video game. So there's sort of the role of pop culture and just our desire for it is a little bit of a thing here, but they don't really develop that too much either. Citizen X is Donald Sutherland and
Stephen
Ray, Maxwell and Saito, etc. So
yeah. I may have actually seen this. This is starting to ring a bit of a bell.
I think it involved the subway or the train system, and I don't think.
I think maybe it was Citizen 44 or Victim 44 or something. It is loosely based on, I think, an actual serial killer that was using the trains to kind of travel to his next victim place or something.
Yeah.
It is based on the true story of Andrei creepy
looking guy. Yeah. Further to Walt's comment, though, in terms of what's going on in Russia, it does change it for me. I mean,
Child 44 is the one.
Okay,
also inspired, but they changed it to the 50s. So the bad guy's played by the murderer is played by Paddy Considine. Considine. And I'm sure Tom Hardy. Yeah, Tom Hardy. Oh Christ! It's Tom Hardy is the investigator.
Hard-bitten.
Jake of Chinatown in this. You almost say, when you think of Chinatown, and then you say, well, the Soviet Russia, maybe. Nomi Rapace, Gary Oldman was the wiser, cynical commander. All right.
But when
DMG.
Walt was asking about
Incompetence and bureaucracy. Sounds like the TV news business. All large organizations, eh? Sorry, you're saying Walt was asking?
No,
Say
Walt
again?
was, he was talking about sort of the role, or how Russia today affects, maybe how, I'm paraphrasing, how you watch something like this. It's hard for me. I haven't gone back. I never finished The Americans. I really enjoyed the first season. It's the show where there's the two agents in Washington, D.C., the two Russian agents, Matthew Reese and what's her name now? Kerry Russell.
Yeah.
And, you sort of root for them a little bit. It's kind of interesting to see how they undermine all the smug Americans. And, ever since this has gone on, I have the second season on DVD at home. Because... I just can't cheer for them, and not that I was big into cheering for them, but that's, it's a bit of a subversive angle to it. And I haven't picked it up.
It'd be interesting to see how their streaming viewership numbers have gone.
Yeah.
Since, what happened.
Or anything like that. Yeah.
But I think maybe it deserves one more comment back to what Walt was saying. I think we did kind of speak to this. This is talking about our current time. It is talking about the Robert Maxwell, once you let us, a capitalist in, we'll ruin the country. Not totally wrong.
No.
I mean, he was trying to rip them off, as he was ripping off hundreds of millions out of pension funds.
Yep.
Because capitalism be capitalism. And
fell
but
over the side
that
of his
is, they don't develop it, but that is part of the Russia now is the wholesale sell-off. And it was. A lot of Americans went in and said, we'll fix your economy based on things we wouldn't be allowed to do back home. Because letting us run the show is a terrible idea. Some inside dealing. Like, in a way, one of the mustache twirlers, Valentin, I think it's Valentin, the Tribunov or Valentin Trifonov, played by Igor Grabazov. He is, what can we say? He was just, he should have just maybe just hung tight for a few more, like another year. And he could have been robbing the place blind. Instead of being in such a rush to, I've got to straddle it, it's like, what can I control when it all goes to shit?
Yeah.
But, well.
Yeah. No, it's...
Walt says, as a Ukrainian, I've had a hard time watching those free Mosfilm movies streaming on YouTube these days. And I get that. Even myself, I'm like, not sympathetic, let's say more realistic portrayal of the Soviet Union, I think is appropriate. But I could see how, anyone would be like, well, listen, Putin's a bad guy, therefore, any positive portrayal of these assholes, and there were, whether you were a sincere member of the Politburo or just a careerist, they're all driving around in much nicer cars.
Yeah.
And able to shop at private shops. and fly in and out of the country. Their lives were fundamentally better than everyone else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and they break in this movie too. They break rules on both sides. Whether it's stealing from your own pension funds or accepting bribes. And that's why you have the good communists and the good capitalists, and you just hope that the good guy with a capitalist gun comes through.
Well, let me ask you about that. Is this a celebration of capitalism?
I was thinking that, but thinking about that, but because you have the Maxwells there, I mean, he, according to the movie, he barely scores this. Like, it's sort of by the skin of his teeth, and it's only because the Maxwells, have sort of robbed themselves blind.
Well, and they got to the airport in time.
Yes, yeah. So
don't forget,
that's
potential gunplay at the Sheremetyevo airport.
Let's go to a different place on the plane. I don't want to go to Japan. Let's go to. I think they were going to Switzerland or something. Like they got on a different. They did that bait and switch thing at the end, which is. I was like, I wonder if they're going to do that thing where you think they're in one room and the bad guys are in the different room and that kind of thing.
Well, they did do it. Late in the second act, when you think they're about to get caught in the bar, and it's actually thugs going to the guy's place of business in Japan.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's right too. Yeah. Yeah. So something that they pull a couple times.
Because some thuggish assholes from the thuggish white assholes.
Yes.
From the Soviet embassy, they wouldn't be followed. No one would be asking any questions. The Japanese would be like, this is a totally normal occurrence in this neighborhood.
Hello, konnichiwa. It's a nice place you have here.
Although who knows? Maybe there'd be there'd be competition between the Japanese and the Americans taking pictures of these doofuses.
Yeah, there were some eye rolly bits in this, but it was sort of a little bit of a, in the bad way, a sort of a comic book treatment. But like I said, the pace, it was a fun movie to watch. Ultimately for me,
this is where I think it could have been less shticky, less lame tropes, overused tropes, but still more entertaining, because there's that whole negotiation, and some of that rings so true to what any Westerner, when they negotiated with the Soviet Union, how often the deal would change, how often we will get back to you.
Well, there's details. They changed the definition of computer
tomorrow, and then it's actually 6 months later. Tomorrow. Yeah. It's like, I've been back home. I got married and we have our first child on the way. Yes, tomorrow we will conduct our business.
Yeah. But also making those details. Making those details, I mean, when you're dealing, essentially it's a movie about contracts, right? And sort of face value.
And
that's
wheeling,
hard to make,
dealing.
That's sort of hard to make interesting, but they managed to make it interesting and lively, and even details like change the definition and little fist fights in the Maxwell's.
That was a nice moment. It's about the only. I doubt that ever happened. Although he's got a punchable face.
Well, young Maxwell had a real sort of a Don Jr. vibe. I was feeling. So
Yeah. But, Jim, could you in a word or in a sentence say what you think this movie is about? What's its theme? What's the main theme here?
Yeah, that's hard.
And that goes for anyone who's seen it in the comments.
After all that we've talked about, it's actually changed a bit for me in the past, since we started. I would say
theme or themes, because I think there's a couple of major ones here, a couple of major messages, as it were.
Yeah, I would say Like I said, I had one earlier, but it's totally gone now. Probably something along the lines of, just simply like a capitalist versus communist kind of thing. That's a little generic, but
Yeah, and I don't think, because
yeah,
it's not like the system's being questioned here.
yeah, that's true.
I would
That's
say,
true. What were
how
you
does
thinking?
this sound? On the one hand, it is a critique, not a particularly deep one, but it's still a critique of robber baron greed. You know,
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
whether it be the Russian politician looking for his bribe, or
Yeah.
Maxwell as he's stealing out of pension funds while trying to steal this. And at the same time, a celebration, as it were, of entrepreneurial hustle,
Pluckiness.
pluckiness, and fair dealing, and of, let's say, the creative person, but mostly that entrepreneurial pluckiness and fair dealing. I don't think it's a communist capitalist thing. It's not a debate of ideologies.
Yeah.
It's more a debate of, or let's say Hank is that exemplar of a hustler, but an honest one, a fair dealer. What is he really always arguing? Is like, no, I didn't rip you off. I bought this. This is the guy who's stealing. He's the only one who gives the Russian publisher, Belikov. He's the only one who gives us, listen, it's worth $150,000, go get that. It's only like, he's the only one who's honest with everybody he's interacting with. Like right from the get-go. Nintendo looks good in this.
Yeah.
Looks really good in this. Maxwell, though, lying, always connections. Like he's a stand-in for Rupert Murdoch and a bit of Trump. And same with the sleazy, the corrupt, the deeply corrupt Russian politician, the minister of cultural bullshit. Insert bullshit here. I think that's really the core theme of the thing. And yes, be a better father, and some of the other hacky crap that they used to, add a little conflict and character development.
What sort of took over for me when I was thinking about it earlier today was that sort of what's the dividing line between some, pure ambition and decent success, because as the wife said, and they didn't, that's my reading. But that one line, again, with the wife saying, you were already providing for us, what's your play here, basically? And, why is this so important to you? Again, wasn't developed, but what was his motivation, right?
But that's the thing, is it can't be much of a theme if they didn't, although who knows, might have gotten left on the editing room floor. They're like, we had to speed this up. This first act is taking forever, and we're still not really turning it well.
And that would have been me reading into it, strictly. So
but they did do some things that imply. It's just where I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying you can't give film credit for not showing it to us. It's the fact that you can think of it, but they didn't put it in isn't, they're playing three-dimensional chess, they're playing checkers, but they didn't give me all the pieces. And now I'm like, I guess I got to spot you a piece. Yeah, I got some cardboard here. We'll make you fucking one more. Before we start thinking about wrapping it up here, Jim, we do have Walt 65 says, and it's in a couple of things. It sounds like the long tradition of individuals trying to develop something important, but facing lots of opposition. He goes on, going back to Warner Brothers movies about inventors in the 30s to even the first half of Dam Busters to Moneyball to the new Air film. I did, Walt, I mentioned the Moneyball film, which I think they could have told the movie like Moneyball was told. And that could have been a deeper movie, maybe. So he's got something there. I don't want to, it's not about the inventor that much. Like, he's already made his invention, and he doesn't even, but it's not like he's looking for his paycheck. He's pissed that knowing this guy has got him fired, kicked out of his apartment, and his children basically threatened to being defenestrated.
Yes. That old go-to
by a thug just looking for his bribe. Walt, it'd be interesting to see what you think, when you see it, because I'm getting a vibe that you haven't seen it. But when you see it, come back in the comments or comment down below. Jim, is there anything else you wanted to add?
I think we covered most of my notes here. It sort of made me want to, as you're saying, made me want to watch Death of Stalin again. Just various other portrayals. I know that Deutschland 85 is on HBO, and I've wanted to watch that for a while, so maybe it's about East Germany.
Yeah.
And things like that. But it's you sort of end up thinking about all the times you've watched movies about this place and which one stands out and which ones are different. Again, Gorky Park, remember that one?
Yeah.
William Hurt back in 1985.
I remember reading the book after I saw the movie.
Yeah.
And then there was
Dennehy was in it, doing his thing. And
and then after that, there was a sequel. I want to say it was called White Star, but a sequel to the book, which I read, because of course he got, and this is one of those things where it's like, he didn't get fired, or he didn't, no one's getting beaten up here. They get fired. They get sent away. That's the way by the 80s, that's the way they were dealing with troublemakers, much like people who, push too hard in any large organization. It's like, can we fire them? Good. Oh, maybe we don't want to fire them. We want to just shuffle them off. The quiet firing. Except Russia has, Siberia.
Exactly.
You're being transferred, comrade inspector. I think it's comrade inspector.
Salt Mine Police
Ginkgo.
Station.
Yeah. Exactly. Is there anyone in this salt mine? No. Make sure no crimes are committed. We expect regular reports.
I mean, I guess what I would say in closing is that it's, it could have gone any number of ways. There's like I said, there was a few eye-rolly moments, including Gorbachev being interrupted at, I guess, May Day parade, and somebody whispering in his ear.
Oh yeah,
bad
that's
agents
gonna
on
happen.
the move. Yeah, exactly. And it's just the blondie who walks up to him. No sort of chain of command. So there's a few eye rollers like that.
Yeah.
But
by then you want the positive end.
Yeah, I bought in.
So it's like,
I'd already bought in by then, so that's those minor details. I still enjoyed it.
On this film, you know that part of what you're buying is some eye rollers, some what the hell.
But I partially I think Taron Egerton really is super intense, and he really sells this. He's got a good eye for projects, I think, and his intensity. You can even see it in the trailer. Is infectious.
But it is. He's easy to watch. He's sympathetic. It's probably what kept me in the first act. Well, that and the obligation to do the show. But it's what kept me even vaguely interested. As I was writing notes. DMG says in the comments, almost sounds like Michael Keaton in The Founder, where the capitalist comes along and steals the idea from the inventor businessman and somehow comes out as the hero. No, I don't think so, Jim. I think he comes out as the hero. He doesn't steal anything. That's the whole point of Hank Rogers' character is he's the honest
straight shooter.
He's the straight shooter, a hustler maybe, but an honest hustler, as the actual inventor's wife says in the movie. He's dumb, but he's honest.
Yes, yeah. In Russian, so he can understand.
Yeah,
right in front of him too.
Yeah.
That was good. But no.
Well, we even get a moment where he is established as a bit of a programmer, and that those two actually connect over playing the game, and he adds some value to the game. It'd be
computer
funner
languages and that kind of thing too. Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that DMG. It's not. Yeah, he's not a flawed hero. This isn't a tragic win for him. You don't find out that you've been sympathizing with the bad guy throughout the entire film. And interestingly enough, he did. It may not be quite the welcome at the airport that we see, but he did start the Tetris company to manage the worldwide rights. He, with the inventor, sounds like he was a reasonably, just an honest businessman. And Nintendo looks really good out of this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it wasn't quite that smooth. I will say that, sometimes in business stories abound with somebody just saying, the boss likes him. Sure, what the hell? We're in for a penny, in for a pound. It doesn't always have to be a ripoff.
Yeah.
But I also think it was, you needed a good company on Hank's side, or this movie just gets really kind of shitty quick.
He'd be on his own. Yeah, you sort of needed that. And it was neat to see the three guys running through the airport, and you could, as they get on the plane, the Japanese guy is smoking. On the plane, another 80s.
Well, when you could,
just like, oh my God, that was close, and
I remember I was 16. I had a smoke on an Air Canada flight to Regina when that kind of thing happened.
Yeah.
Not just the smoking, but flying from Winnipeg to Regina on a regular flight.
Yes. Yeah. It's so I'd say for video game fans, especially Nintendo fans, there's a lot of little Easter eggs. There's the great scene where he sees the prototype Game Boy. That was sort of a neat one too. Why am I signing an NDA? Only 10 people have seen this, and that was behold, and it's got a cloth draped over it.
Well,
and things
this
like that.
is
So there's a lot of those little
going back
treats
to
in there.
whether it be Moneyball or maybe I'm saying this. This is great, but they could go back to this well. Where's that big movie treatment of some of these? There's some great video game creation stories and that involve Western culture. What it was, who these people were, programmers, and not to say that Tetris doesn't deserve this little spotlight, but I did.
It helped
DMG.
According to the newscast at the time.
All right, DMG says, is there a Yakov Smirnov cameo at least? At least? Lol, what? What a country! Wait a second.
Oh,
that deserves treatment.
There we go. There we go. Or at the very least, Nestor Pister. I don't know if you remember him.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise. Yakov
Yeah,
Smirnov.
that was a little before my time, but I still remember. I think he was a Ukrainian humorist, like Yakov Smirnov, who
Yeah.
sort of poked fun at his own society and that kind of thing. Walt
Yeah.
may know what I'm talking about, although it might have been a prairies thing too.
Well,
I'm
and
not-
I
not
think
entirely
though,
sure.
coming back to circling back to that, like a lot of comics out of Russia of this time, they weren't going, that's an evil guy. And they didn't look at it the way we have been raised to look at the evil empire. They
Yeah.
looked at it more from a lens of incompetence, pettiness, and no, everybody lying and no stuff.
Yeah.
Which in many respects is still existent. It may be Putin's Russia and it's smaller and all these other things, but it's also, as we've seen in the Ukraine, it's like, well, somebody has been lying to all the big shots because that army was not
Yeah.
ready for this. Oh, yes, comrade. Yes, President Yeltsin.
These
We're
tires-
ready. We're going to kick
these-
their ass.
Tires are the best. They're 20 years old. Haven't been replaced. What do you mean I have 8 flats?
Well, and then it's like, General, they're 50 years old. Shut up. I already said 20.
Yeah.
Go get some from storage. Oh, you mean where we have 8 million of them from 1938?
What's WD-40 in Russian? As the tank grinds to a halt.
Yeah. Alrighty, everybody, we are going to wrap it up now. Once again, thank you all very, very
Yeah.
much. You know what?
Turnout.
This was a lot of fun. And DMG, Walt65, Richard L., Katie Fowler, and of course, our man in Kuwait City, Ahmed Jelly Duck 100. Goodbye,
Yay.
everybody. Next week, there'll be an announcement. That's why you want to like and subscribe and all that other stuff.